in front of you, you have the instructions, so you can follow along and little take notes if you need to for there. We're just going to get through, my instructions disappeared. Through to, Tim, can I have those instructions? Through to, I think, there we go, to step 6. We're gonna go all the way down to step 6, and then we'll be able to stop, and it'll have time to dry over the week, and then we'll continue on from there, okay? All right, so I am gonna show you the composition using the cruciform design, because it's really the easiest one to understand, and also it's a really easy one to do in an abstract way. So these are just going to be abstracts. So I encourage you if you want to. So we're going to work on 2 at a time. If you want to do one cruciform and challenge yourself to use a different archetype, you can go for that. Otherwise, you can do both cruciform design, okay? So this is an example of a finished one that was finished here. So can you, I don't think you can tell what the paint is and where the paper is for the most part, right? Can you see the cross, the cruciform? Like that, okay? So this is a smaller version. We're gonna be working about twice as big as this on 2 at a time. And the reason we're working on 2 at a time is because between the watercolor and the collaging and collage glue, there's gonna be some dry time. And that way, you can be, while you're working on one, the other one's drying. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I adapted this project from a really good art educator, art teacher. I meant to look it up to see if he's still with us on this earth. But his name is Gerald Brommer, and he did a lot for the art education community as far as art teachers go. But he also used to be on the circuit of people who used to go around to the various different places teaching week-long retreats, and he and his wife. So I actually met him even though I wasn't at this place to take his class. I was taking another class to learn how to do Yupo, watercolor on Yupo, but he was there with his wife, and he was a really nice gentleman. So much so that he allowed all of us to come into the studio to take pictures and talk to us, where some of the other people that were teaching there we were told not to go in if we weren't their students. Well, I thought, like, okay. So, but he was super nice. But this is a great book. It's a very old book, so you can probably find it at a used bookstore. So this project that I am calling Translucent Veils was adapted from one of his projects that he does in here, okay? So his name is Gerald Brommer. All right, so in just a little bit after I show you all of this, Tim's gonna pass out to you 2 pieces of cardboard and 2 pieces of watercolor paper. This watercolor paper is professional grade watercolor paper that's 140 pounds, and it is Arches, which is the high standard of water. It used to be the thing to get for watercolor paper, and now Kilimanjaro and a couple of other companies are making really good quality watercolor paper, but Arches used to be the gold standard of watercolor paper. And the difference is really good professional grade watercolor paper will hold a lot of water, and which is really important when you're doing watercolor or watercolor collages, okay? So we taped it down because you'll see when we start wetting these that they will buckle a little bit. Now, if we were working bigger, we would need to tape these down in the proper way of taping watercolor paper down, which is that brown paper that if you've ever seen or ever done watercolor papers. But because we're working really small and we're not straight up doing watercolor, we're doing watercolor collage, we can get away with just using the blue tape, okay? So you're gonna get 2 of them. So you're gonna work on 2 at a time. And so you're gonna get a roll of tape, and you just want 1/4 of the piece of tape to overlap on the watercolor paper itself. And if you're real careful to make it straight, it makes this beautiful white edge. So if you like that white edge, you can, and you frame it, you can float it's called floating it, where the mat or the frame is going around it, and it just sits on top. Otherwise, it also gives the framer, if you're going to frame it in a mat, a little bit of space to overlap, so you're not actually covering up your artwork. Okay? Everybody got that? Okay. So you can see the actual paper through the tape, and so you can kind of eyeball it and line it up stick it down, and then you have scissors, you can cut it or just rip it like I did, just like that, okay? So I'm gonna move this over here. So you're gonna do both of the piece of papers with tape. But before you do that, I forgot to tell you to, please write your name on the back of each piece of paper. Now some watercolor papers have a front and a back. Arches, mostly arches do not. They are the same on the front and the back. The sizing is the same. But so please make sure you write your name and the Roman numeral 5 and W if you're in this class. If you're here but you're in the Tuesday class, put a T instead of a W. And write it both on the paper on the back before you tape it, and then write it on the cardboard. Because you're gonna put these on the drying rack today, and when they're dry, we will put them together and put them in the drawer for you. So make sure you put your name on there, okay? And there's pencils on the table. They were in the center of the table if you haven't already found one. Okay, so step 1, we're gonna wet the entire paper. And you don't wanna use your glue brush, so that should be in the water unless you cleaned it out. And you're gonna wet the entire paper because I'm gonna give you a little bucket, each of you, of clean water. So try really hard not to stick your dirty brush inside your clean water because you're gonna need the clean water to stay clean. So this should be your rinse out bucket. Rinsing out your brush with the glue and rinsing it out from the ink that we're gonna start with. And then we're gonna give you a watercolor brush as well because you need to start out by wetting the whole piece of paper. So kind of just keep dipping your brush in. And this part is very therapeutic, or I find it so, because with water, that is the vehicle, and the paint, or in this case, the ink, is gonna follow the water. So you're gonna see that when I put the ink on here, it's just gonna bloom all by itself, and it's really interesting to watch. Now I am gonna purposefully and consciously make a cross or a cruciform, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have to start here and go down here and start here and go down here. I can kind of start over here and wiggle around and then end up here, like that. So your cruciform doesn't have to be, or it can be, but it doesn't have to be a perfect cross right in the dead center. Does that make sense? But you do want to, at least on your first one, to try to paint so that you are painting in a cruciform design. Okay, so I'm just going to dip right into the India ink. Doesn't take very much, and then you see how it's spreading. Isn't that cool? So you can try doing the brush in different ways and see if you can get different marks. And as the watercolor dries, obviously the India ink won't spread quite as much. So let's say I put a whole lot of water on there, and I just want to pull up a little bit right over here, so that India ink doesn't spread just as much if I go the other direction. So then, like that, I can do a different marks. So as it's drying, if I want to, I can add a little bit more. So as long as I keep this idea that where I am painting, even though it's spreading on its own, I am trying to keep this idea of a cruciform design. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Don't overthink it too much, though, because most of it's going to get covered up with collage paper and then painted over. But try to keep this idea of a cruciform design. It's going to give you instant value, and value is lightness to darkness, or darkness to lightness. So look, I've got the daddy darks already. I got some medium values happening, and then I even got some really light values, just by the process of wetting that paper first to allow that India ink to spread. Okay, so this is again why you're working on 2 at once, because this will be drying a little bit to give us time before we collage over the top of it. So I just happen to have one already done for you. Okay, so there is my one that I did last night, and you can see I made different marks, but there is my cruciform right there. I have a tendency to do a lot of curves in my work too, so what you're going to do now is you're going to switch over to your glue brush. Try not to stick your India ink brush in your clean water. If you do, you just have to change it out before your next one. Okay. What you're going to do now is you're going to add collage on top of all of the inked area, and you're going to try to go for maybe 95% of it completely covered, all this India ink covered, but not all of this area. So just where you actually purposefully painted the India ink, you're gonna cover that with rice papers. So these are all different kind of rice papers. And most of them are gonna be in a container for you in the middle of your table, okay? That we're gonna put there. But rice papers come in a variety of different ways and made with different things. Some of them look like lace papers like these. You see how see-through these are? And sometimes when you pull them apart, they have these really cool strands and strings like this. Some of them are sumi papers, some of them are unryu papers, or all type of rice papers. Some of them have leaves or bark embedded in them, like these ones right here, dried leaves. Some of them, when you lay them down and then you collage them into a painting, they become completely transparent. So that's why this project, I call it translucent veils, because it will look, you'll be able to see some of the India ink through them, depending. Some of them now are really, really thick, and you'll be able to tell just by feeling it. So you can keep that in mind, depending on what collage papers you used. If you know that you don't like a certain area and you want to block it out, you could use a thicker paper, right? But if you really love an area, but you need a transition area from a darkness to a lightness, or you just want to lighten it, you can collage over it with a more see-through paper. Like this one would pretty much goes on almost completely clear. There is a little design on there, but you can't see it from that, okay? All of these papers actually came from a little packet that I got off Amazon. And they have other colors that aren't white, but this was their white packet, which I was really happy with because these ones all came out of there. So if you love this idea of collaging, you can, and it was like $7. So I can, I'll include the link if you guys want when I send you another email with this recording, okay? Okay, so then, you have your cruciform design, and believe it or not, because the India ink is permanent, even though it may not be completely dry by the time you're ready for this step, it will not bleed onto your rice paper, okay? So we are, just to let you know on here, you have just finished wetting the paper and doing the underpainting of step 2, and then you've done step 3 because you should have done the second one.
With the rice paper, you said the India ink won't bleed up. Are we going to paint on the rice paper and the rice paper will absorb?
Nope. Okay. I'm going to show you that right now. Okay. So then you are going to use these collage papers in your bucket. I just happen to have a whole bunch of scraps that I'm going to use to collage them just like you did with these, where you did glue, paper, glue. You're going to do that on top of the India ink areas that you did. Keeping in mind that some of them are see-through and some of them are not. Some of them are translucent and some of them are opaque. So just like this. So I can use them, a variety of them. Now, just like we did with the black tissue paper, you can rip it if you like more of a deckled edge. And depending on the rice paper, sometimes you get those strands and sometimes it just gives you a deckled edge. If you like more things that are more geometric and hard-edged, you could use scissors to cut it. I like the interplay of both of those ideas, although I tend to lean toward organic things, and Tim, of course, being an architect, he leans towards more straight edge things. So you can kind of decide what you like to do there. So what I do to begin is I just sort of find papers that I really like, and then I rip them into a shape, and then I'll just start playing around and laying it down along my cruciform design. And sometimes I like the idea of playing up that straight edge against the more organic side, or sometimes I'll just rip it so it has organic sides on both. I love these papers that when you rip it, it has all this interesting stuff. You can overlap them, because the overlapping of a lot of rice papers gives you yet another value. You'll see one on top of the other will give you another value, and it will always also give you some really cool aha moments that you may not have intended, which is why I really like collage, because I tend to overthink things, and collage forces me to allow the painting to lead me. And so just by, playing around and adding different papers in different areas, it will give you, and then you collage it and you'll see what I mean. It might have things happen that you didn't intend. So then you have to work with those happenings. Like that, right there. Okay, so I would keep along that way. I usually do a couple and then I collage. Some people like to do one piece, collage it, and some other people like to put all of them down so they can have a good idea and then collage the whole thing. But you still have to do one piece at a time, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to take my glue. So if you added your glue to it today, make sure that you fill your glue up to that line and you give it a shake so the two mediums mix together, so you have more of a thicker medium but also more of a matte medium than a gloss or a straight out, more of a satin medium, excuse me. I don't know why I just did that. More of a satin medium than a gloss or a matte medium. So don't do what I just did. I shouldn't talk and do something at the same time. Okay, so same process as before. You're going to glue the paper down by adding the glue to the substrate or the watercolor paper, in this case itself. I'm going to turn it this way, it'll be better. And then put that on top and then put more glue on top while pressing down with your glue brush to make sure the paper is nice and flat. Now for this particular case, if you wanted more of a crinkled look, you could crinkle the paper on purpose and do it more so it has a three-dimensional effect. So that's totally fine too. I haven't tried that, so let's try it. So I'm going to put this piece of paper right here and put that down, and then I'm going to purposefully keep those wrinkles in, see what happens. Oh, look at that, it gave me some interesting, so when I lay watercolor over that, that's going to catch the surface of those three-dimensional shapes, just like that. And then the rice papers that are more like lace papers, you're going to be able to see a lot more of that underpainting right through. Look how it sort of really just disappeared into that. Isn't that cool? I love that. So I just happen to have one that is already sort of glued down but not finished but dry, and I used some of those rice papers that had the strands in it there that you pulled out. So I would continue this process and add more going these ways. I really like this effect, so I may not purposely not try to cover that because I like whatever that's happening there. But I'm still going to kind of collage into it at least a little bit. So where you're going is to do this. So by the end of class today, you want to have both of your pieces mostly done with collage right over the top of that underpainting. So can you see how this went from this right here to that, where I covered over the top of it. When you get ready to start collaging, if you have a puddle, all you have to do is blot it up. So if anything is super wet, you just have to blot it. Don't rub it, but blot it up. And again, the India ink is permanent, so it's not going to smear into your collage, even though it might still be a little damp. Okay, as long as there's not a puddle of it. You do want to blot up the puddle, if so. But it does also dry fairly fast. Okay, do you have any questions? Yeah.
So on the one with the rice paper, that one.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to cover the India ink, but you can spill over into the white area.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
You can. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to try to cover the whole thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You can, but we're trying to keep this idea of a cruciform composition, so it will help you do that when we start continuing down with the watercolor next week. So these are going to be neutral colored integrated collages. So next week you will have brown and black, and remember black is the color that's made of all colors, so we're going to be using liquid watercolor, so that's why you see some of the blue there, because the black this particular brand looks a little bluish. So, but it is by far still a neutral color. And then we'll finish up with these cool acrylic writers that you can add a little bit of gestural work with it on top. These little spots that you see, These are because I flicked the brush a little bit and did a little bit of spatter, so you can do that too to add a little bit of sparkle to your piece now or later as well. Okay? All right, so you should have those instructions. Please don't be afraid to ask. We're going to start handing out the tape and the watercolor paper first, and then we'll keep giving you more stuff like the India ink. Don't forget to try to keep this little bucket clean if you can. And I think that's everything. Don't forget to write your name on stuff. That's the most important. Okay. Okay? All right. So